Greetings, my gay and queer brothers and sisters. On behalf of This Way Out Global LGBTQ Radio, I'm Don Kilhefner, who has been a gay community organizer in Los Angeles and nationally, continuously for the past 50 years. I'll be reading sections of my recent essay titled, The Radical Faeries at 40, Rainbow Capitalism or Queer Liberation. It's found in full at the laprogressive.com or wehoville.com. Labor Day weekend 2019 marked the 40th anniversary of the birth of the Radical Faeries, an international gay-centered consciousness and spirituality movement, brimming with social change and social justice possibility that came out of Los Angeles. Today, its original raison d'etre is even more relevant to gay and queer men than in 1979 when the Radical Faeries were founded. In June 1979, after a year and a half of dialoguing and planning, Harry Hay, founder in 1951 of the historically important and groundbreaking Mattachine Society in Los Angeles, and I, an early gay liberationist, and in 1970, co-founder of the pioneering LA Community Services Center, started mailing out a leaflet in hand-addressed, hand-stamped envelopes that called the Radical Faeries into being. The word fairy, magical creatures found globally, was reclaimed and reimagined. It had been a name used with hatred and humiliation by heterosupremacists against gay men. The word radical was utilized both in its Latin root meaning, something that has depth to it, as well as its current socio-political connotation of something new and daring. After looking for the right location for the first gathering for over a year, very late in April 1979, we decided on the Sri Ram Ashram in the Sonoran Desert of Arizona. Then the actual manifestation of the idea stage took place between May and August 1979. Impossibly, the gathering was scheduled to occur over the Labor Day weekend, 10 weeks after it was announced, to meet together in a very remote, hard to get to spot in the sweltering Arizona desert, about 46 miles east of Tucson. Hay and I thought we'd be extremely lucky if 25 gay men showed up. Amazingly, 220 men from all over North America found their way to that out-of-the-way spot in the desert. That Labor Day weekend, the Radical Faeries were born. There was no rigid, pre-planned structure built into the gathering. The content was primarily allowed to emerge from the participants. For 3 exciting, inspiring, and growing edge days, we shared our gifts and talents with each other. We talked about who we are as gay men and our purpose in society. A different model for gay community organizing was put forth that included issues of identity, purpose, race, and class. And love and lust blossomed under the awesomely beautiful desert night stars. Just as everybody was departing the gathering as a sign of what was to come, a double rainbow suddenly appeared directly over the spot where we had been meeting. Like dandelion seeds blown by the winds of fate, those 220 gay men spontaneously started Radical Faerie gathering, large and small, in cities, towns, and rural areas across the United States and Canada, and eventually globally. He and I deliberately wanted the Radical Faeries to be grassroots and decentralized, with each gathering of fairies being independent and determining its own personality and form, while at the same time united in a web of gay brotherhood and exploration of gay consciousness and spirituality. The front side of the original 1979 leaflet invited gay men to gather in the desert, stated our intentions clearly. 1, exploring breakthroughs in gay consciousness. 2, sharing gay visions. And 3, manifesting the spiritual dimension of being gay. Along with the gay liberation movement itself and the AIDS quilt, the radical fairies represent a unique and historic example of gay and queer community-based grassroots organizing. There was no public or private funding. There were no corporate sponsors. There were no CEOs. 40 years later, the radical fairies are alive and well, with gatherings of various sizes around the world. 3 residential fairy sanctuaries exist in rural areas of the United States: Wolf Creek, Oregon, Zuni Mountain, Arizona, and Short Mountain, Tennessee, and in France and Australia. In 2017, the Albion Fairies in England held a sold-out global radical fairy gathering in a castle, no less, with particular outreach to fairies in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East. In 2019, a great fairy circle was convened at the residential fairy sanctuary at Faeries in Eastern France. For anyone interested in this fascinating grassroots history, see my essay titled "The Birth of the Radical Fairies" in the Gay and Lesbian Review in the September-October 2010 issue. Now, why were the radical fairies called into being? During the early 1970s, in the aftermath of the 1969 Stonewall Rebellion, the burgeoning grassroots gay liberation movement had created a small clearing in the forest of heterosupremacy. Gay and lesbian people, at long last, and for the first time, had a collective window of opportunity to move beyond individual, isolated survival. A courageous handful of early gay liberationists rose to the challenge, going through that window, changing the historical narrative from oppression to liberation. In the 1970s, gay and lesbian people created, largely from scratch, visible and organized communities, institutions, media, cultural venues, healthy sexual identities, and proactive organizing with direct and militant political action. An amazing political and cultural achievement. Gay people, you have a history that you can be proud of. By the late 1970s, however, in the dialogues between us, both he and I sensed that gay people were beginning to lose their way again. The historic window of opportunity available to us as a people, as a consequence of Stonewall, was beginning to be irresponsibly squandered by a gradual drift towards respectability politics with its mindless gay assimilation and shallow heteroconformity. The possibility of creating a new gay-derived and gay-defined identity was beginning to fade. Our very being continued to be reduced to the oppressive idea that gay identity was nothing more than same-sex sexual behavior and relationship. Just like heteros, but with a perverse sexual twist. In the process, this unexamined reductionism perpetuated a self-denying and self-limiting identity which gay people had internalized over centuries of heterosupremacist ideology, propaganda, and intellectual and physical genocide. Yes, gay genocide, as defined by the United Nations. A genocide still happening throughout much of the world. The Reagan Revolution of the 1980s and beyond moved the political and social environment towards the extreme conservative right side of the pendulum swing, with a concomitant shift of gay community zeitgeist and leadership in that conservative political direction as well. Thereafter, in the 1980s and beyond, a whole generation of gay and lesbian people were beginning to be shaped more by the values of the Reagan Revolution rather than by the anti-Vietnam War, Black civil rights, social change, social justice, feminist revolution of the 1960s and 1970s, which seeded and incubated the birth of the gay liberation movement. Today, 2020, we still live with the results of that pendulum swing to the right, with a stagnant, status quo political condition in the LGBTQ community, where race and class are rarely part of the discussion, where leadership is often equated with owning property, elite education and wealth, and in which gay and lesbian people generally find themselves in an unimaginative assimilationist cultural milieu, driven around the clock by the surveillance capitalism, militarism, entertainment, consumerism, superstructure of American society at this time. The radical fairies were called into being as an antidote to the unexamined assumption underlying the gay assimilation sexual orientation model of gay identity that permeates the LGBT community today. It is an identity that says gay people are just a sex act with relational overtones, otherwise just like heteros. The early radical fairies were called into being to explore a revolutionary revisioning of gay identity that is now called gay essentialism, social contribution model. This means that radical fairies are gay-centered, understanding that gay reality is important, substantial, and purposeful. This means that our identity starts with us, not them. At the same time, it is larger than us and them polarities, more like yin and yang wholeness, heteros and homos complementing and supplementing each other in some mysterious way. There is a further growing understanding that being gay and queer constitutes a significant evolutionary and social purpose, much, much greater than the sexual orientation identity to which our hetero oppressors have shackled gay and lesbian people. Soon after the first gathering, academics began calling the radical fairies approach gay essentialism, meaning there is something basic and essential about what gay people are contributing to society that contributes to the evolution of our species, as opposed to reducing us merely to sexual orientation and assimilation. Harry Hay often quipped with me that gay people are just like heteros in what we do in bed, but in all other ways we are different. The radical fairies represent a gay essentialism, social contribution model of gay identity, with a distinguished intellectual history and real potential for changing individuals and society, as well as healing the wounds of countless generations of violence against gay people. Let me close by asking you a question. Do you really think TV's Queer Eye cotton candy is important to the evolution of gay, queer, political, and existential consciousness and the forward movement of the community? That's all, folks. If you have the courage, check out the Radical Fairies at 40, Rainbow Capitalism, or Queer Liberation at laprogressive.com or wehoville.com. And thank you. And thank you to This Way Out for the great queer read-in today.